Matthew is a priest in the Church of England. I'm a priest in the Church of England. We look slightly different. We get called different names. Are we vicars? Are we pastors? Are we ministers? Matthew is an Anglican Catholic. I'm an evangelical. What do I call him? What does he call me? What do people call us? Today we're going to have that discussion. Check it out right here, right now. Hi, my name is Dan Beasley, and this channel is all about inspiring intentional discipleship, helping you go deeper in your faith and living it out in the world today. Me and Matthew are living our faith out in the world today. We are called to be priests in the Church of England, but a lot of people kind of don't know what we really are. They see the collar, or no collar in my case, and I hear all these different names. I had a message from a guy over in the States as I did a video about my calling and how I became a vicar, priest, and he said, what even is a vicar? I don't get what a vicar is. And when I said I'm a pastor, he knew exactly that. So we're going to sit today and we are going to have that discussion.
I think I think the whole vicar thing is fascinating because it's such an English word, and of course the TV series, A Vicar's Life, that I was in. The funny thing about that was that I'm not a vicar. I certainly wasn't a vicar when it was being filmed. I was a deacon. I wasn't even a priest.
Yeah.
So there we are. There's three words there. We've got deacon, priest, vicar, curate. So that's another word.
Well, that's the thing as well.
There's bishops.
Bishops. The same time that you were. So at the same time that you were a curate, I was a curate. And in our church, we had a rector, we had a curate, and we had a minister, but we didn't have a vicar. And yet people would call us vicars, and there wasn't a vicar. I was a curate, I'm now a assistant curate again, and I'm going to go be a priest in charge. So for the next 4 or 5 years, or 8 years, I will never be a vicar.
So I spend an inordinate amount of time explaining to people what it is and what I do. And so you get, it's the taxi conversation, isn't it? What do you do? Is you sitting in the back of the taxi and you're going, I'm here for 5 minutes, how do I explain? Well, that's a really interesting question. Yeah. I don't get that when I'm in collar.
So it
seems to cut through all of the language. And when I wear my cassock, which I do most of the time, there is no conversation about who are you, what do you do. It just seems to go straight to priest.
Okay, so here's the thing. So cassock is actually something different that most people outside your side of the church would not really. In the Church of England, you have to say it's what a Roman Catholic priest would wear.
Yeah, I mean, I think that.
So what's a cassock?
Well, I think that I talk about the cassock because I think it does the same thing as language, in that it helps people understand what and who you are. But we have to use that language accurately. So one of the great debates within the church, especially amongst more junior members of the church, curates, like you were and I am, is about, oh, well, if someone calls me a vicar, I just kind of go along with it. And I kind of say no, because we've got a duty to educate, to help people understand what it is that we do. And actually what there are, and what I end up explaining to people, is that there are two sets of things. There are orders in the church, because the Church of England is Catholic and Apostolic. Yep. And so we have orders. And so we have the order of deacons, we have the order of priests, and we have the order of bishops. Yep. And they are not meant to be hierarchical, they are callings, they are things into which we are ordained, called by God. And so we're both priests.
And clerks of holy orders.
Well, let's just let's put that aside for a minute. We have threefold orders in the Church of England: deacons, priests, and bishops. We were both deacons. We are now both priests, but we are still deacons as well. We were ordained deacons, ordained priests. And, should everything go horrendously badly wrong in the Church of England, one day one of us may be ordained a bishop. Should it go absolutely badly wrong, and there's no one else left except you and I, then we'll have to do it. But they're orders, and that's not about hierarchy, that's about what God calls you to do. Yep. So deacons called to be on the edges of church, to be with people who don't understand necessarily who we are, who don't understand who Christ is, and to bring them into that family. So I always think a deacon, and this was hugely important in my first year, I always think that a deacon is meant to spend more time out of the church than they do in the church. And then in church on a Sunday, the deacon is the person that you see at the altar who's assisting the priest. Deacon, literally, servant, so serving at the altar with the priest. The priest called to provide the sacraments. That's what that's my bit of the church, to say mass, to pray, which is also, of course, a lay calling. But there are specific things that you're called to as a priest, to anoint the sick and the dying. All of those priestly ministries, and then bishop, ordained, called to be the father of God, of his priests and of his deacons.
Yep.
They are ordained orders. But then, like any organisation, we have jobs.
Yes.
And our jobs: clerk in holy orders, chaplain, vicar, rector, padre. I'm a padre. I'm a padre at the local Icadex.
Yes.
But that's a job. It's a job title. Assistant curate. Well, I mean, that's confusing, of course, because the incumbent of a church, the person who runs the church, another word again, incumbent, the person who's in charge in the church, is the curate. It literally means they have the cure of souls, shared with the bishop in that parish.
Yeah.
So what we often call curates now, we're really assistant curates. We are assisting in the cure of souls.
Yeah.
Of that.
And that's a funny thing, because at the moment, and even in the Church of England, if I say that I'm a curate, you would think that I'm training. I'm in a period after theological college that I've gone to train, and then once that's finished, I am then like qualified, as it were, and then I get a proper title, rector, vicar, or minister, or whatever it is. Where I am now, which is even more confusing, I am an assistant curate again. But my title that others have been told is that I'm an interim associate minister.
It's just job titles, but it is like any other organisation in that you have this plethora of job titles that are confusing and are difficult, and it's quite hard to draw an organisational chart in the Church of England with all those jobs, especially when so many of those job titles are historic. So vicar and rector, you're either vicar or rector, basically based on how the income of that church was generated, where the tithes were, the greater tithe, the lower. Go Google all of that. You don't need to explain it. But that's the difference between rector and vicar. In the modern church, in the contemporary church, the difference between rector and vicar is that the rector is more senior to the vicar. So in team ministry, you'll have a team rector who is in charge of the team, and there is a team vicar who will be his colleague. But reports into, if you like, is line managed by the rector. Not in all cases, but certainly that's increasingly how it's viewed.
But because it's become so historic, and then we face this difficulty now, because the church is kind of going to the margins of society, not as important. A lot of people don't understand. So a lot of questions I get is, why is this person called rector? Why not vicar? Because that isn't known, isn't kind of understood.
I think that is, to a greater or lesser extent, irrelevant whether or not you're a vicar or you're a rector. Or I think that's important within the organisation. Certainly, it's important to understand where you sit in the organisation. But to Joe Bloggs on the streets, he or she don't care if you're vicar, rector, assistant curate, padre, chaplain, whatever. They see your collar, they see your cassock, and they think priest, because that just draws a straight line to priest. This person knows about God, and I can talk to them about God.
I think that's the important thing, because it's interesting that when I was a curate, having those conversations of, I've been ordained a deacon, I'm now ordained a priest, I will be a priest forever until I die. But I am a curate, but I could leave my curacy. I could fail my curacy even, and not work in the Church of England again, but I would still be a priest. And they say, wait a sec, so you're kind of qualified because you're a priest, but you're still in training?
Yeah, but
this is what we need.
We have to separate the qualification.
Exactly.
We have to pull apart the qualification, because the qualification isn't about orders.
Yeah.
Deacon, priest, bishop, those orders are about what you are called to by God. And so the church as an institution looks at ways to ascertain whether or not that calling is recognized by both church, by you, and God, that three-way relationship. And so training, if you like, is a formalized way of saying, okay, we all recognize that calling in one another. It provides some space and time for you to figure out what that calling may or may not be, which is why I kind of get irritated when we talk about people failing their curacies or failing their training. Because if our training and if our training in colleges, whether or not that's full-time, part-time, whatever it is an opportunity to discover what it is that God has called us to, the specifics of what that may look like here and now, then sometimes we may go down incorrect paths because we've got too much of ourselves in it, or because of other factors, or you get a year or two into it and God goes, no, I want you to go this way. And actually being obedient to that call is more important than the issues around failing within your training. And so I think we've got to find better language around how our training and our orders interact with one another.
Well, because the thing I think a lot of people don't understand is actually we are called and we're licensed as well to places, or when we are called to places, because we are basically doing communion because the bishop can't be there, so we are doing.
Yeah, we share in the cure of souls with the bishop. It's the bishop's license that we hold, permission to operate as a priest within this parish, and we must never ever lose sight that we share in that cure of souls with the bishop. It is a shared.
Yeah, and but I think a lot of people, and in the church, don't understand that. Actually, we have a license from the bishop to go there. That's why we get licensing, because the bishop can't be in every place. So we are, if he could, or she.
But that's scriptural. That's where that comes from.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the apostles saying, okay, we it's the apostles facing the reality that they can't do everything, and it's right there. It's right there in the New Testament with the apostles saying we can't do it. Well, people saying to them, you can't do it all. You need some help. And the appointing of the first deacons.
Do you think, though, in this little discussion, that now we should, because a lot of those terms are historical, that a lot of the terms we should get
antisterical?
Yeah.
Well,
and to be known as priests.
I think they do speak into different contexts. I mean, for me, yes, we are priests. Yeah. I mean, and that's it. That's how I introduce myself. That's how I describe myself. And my experience has been that cuts through an awful lot of misconceptions. This church, this parish that we're in now, St. Mary's here in Kenton, this parish is absolutely centred on prayer. And so actually within my context here, within this parish, if people ask me what I do and I say I'm a priest, then they know that I'm there to pray for them. They know that I'm there to bring them the sacrament. And so you kind of skip an awful lot of the small talk of, how many people have you got coming to church? When's your next tea? Are you having all that stuff that gets caught up in the title of vicar or rector, or you say you're a priest and people say, I've got a job interview next week, will you pray for me, please? Actually, things have been really tough. I don't know where to go. Will you pray for me? Yesterday, a lady saying to me, my sister's gone right off the rails. It turns out she lives just around the corner. Will you go and see her? Will you pray with her? Will you help her? And of course we will. It just cuts through all of it.
But I think, and this is where we get to the crux of if we talk about priests now, between the Anglo-Catholic side of the church and the evangelical side of the church, I don't hear evangelicals saying, I'm a priest. In fact, they would say, I'm a vicar, or I'm a minister. But the word priest I wouldn't associate it so much with the evangelical side, even though we are priests. You wouldn't hear evangelical ministers or vicars saying, I'm a priest, because that kind of
why not?
I don't know.
Come on, you are now representing all
evangelicals out there. Yeah.
Here's your man.
Because of you, the connotations from you and you.
Yeah, you're right.
Because you don't want to be known as an evangelical, you don't want to be known as an Anglo-Catholic. But actually, this is the crux of it. We fundamentally, like you say, curate, in your curacy, in assistant curate, vicar, rector, padre, that's just the title. We are priests. We sit here now as priests. God will see us as priests, whether you're Anglo-Catholic or evangelical, you're a priest. But the evangelical side will struggle to say that they're priests, because when you say to a layperson came in, we had it at your licensing here when I came to your licensing, and I was in normal clothes and jeans probably, with a collar, and the lady called me Father, as you get called, and I said, well, no, I'm called Dan, and it's like, why? If I said, oh, I'm a priest, but she'd probably like, but you're not dressed like Matthew, and I think there's this distance.
Well, see, now that's really interesting, isn't it? Because in terms of me being called Father, I will introduce myself as Father Matthew. So somebody says to me, I'm Father Matthew.
Yeah.
And again, it's a shortcut. It's language that just says, I'm a priest. People know what that means. People, culturally, when you have Father somebody, we know that Father whoever will pray for you, will provide the sacrament for you, and will solve a murder at a country house. Right? We know culturally that's what the language means. But if somebody calls me Matthew, if somebody calls me or you, if somebody calls me the curate, I don't correct people's language of how they dress, unless they got my name wrong, but I don't correct that. But I do introduce myself as Father.
Whereas I, or probably anybody else that I went to college with, if there's a very good evangelical college, would ever say that they're Father at all, and say, Jesus said you will have no other father. You can't use that term.
So you don't call your father, father, and you don't call your mother, mother. And you've abandoned, you've turned your back on your earthly family to completely follow Christ. Jesus gives us a bar that is up there, that is right and proper, that we should go for. But I mean, even Paul talks about being called Father and teacher and rabbi, talks about that language. Language is a tool that should be deployed to help people cut through issues that they may have in talking to us about God. Now, I completely accept, that being Father, wearing my cassock, wearing clericals, which is what I'm wearing today, shirt and trousers, all of that comes with baggage. And that the evangelical side of the church goes, that baggage is really unhelpful, and actually I find it better to connect in this way. Now, I disagree with that. I disagree with that, because my experience is that if I'm working with a homeless or vulnerable person and I rock up in cassock, I don't look like anything. I don't look anything like the other people who have tried to help them in suits or in jeans and a jumper, or I am something completely different, and so my approach is more often welcomed. It can have the opposite effect as well.
I think that's what
but that's the strength of the Church of England, is that we have all of that range.
And I was going to say, I think what the evangelicals bulk at, and we will always go to this as Anglo-Catholics with the evangelicals, so you will go to the streams where it has been abused. And when it has been abused and it becomes about the person, now, you're very different. That's why it's easy to have conversations, because you can show that way, actually, this is the reason why, and you kind of pull it back. This is why it's called Father. I went to one of my local primary schools where I'm at the moment, and the head introduced me as Father Dan, which I did kind of go, what? At the moment, there was parents there, and I thought,
why?
what?
Why?
Because it's really strange. Because
what a loving way to refer to you. What a beautiful, loving way.
It is, but it's also weird. It's. I don't know. It's where I come from in the church, and it also makes me feel old. It makes me feel like that country vicar.
I hate to tell you this, but you are old.
It puts me to something that I don't feel like I am.
All of these things have to be deployed as tools in bringing people to God. That's the bottom. It's all tools, and it doesn't matter whether or not you're Pastor Dan, Jess Dan, you're wearing a turtleneck and jeans and I'm wearing... It doesn't matter if those things are helping us talk to people about God. And the moment they get in the way of us talking about God, then we have to discard them and try something new.
But why can't you just... At my other school, I'm Reverend Dan. Why can you not be Reverend Matthew? Or,
well, I often am.
Instead of Father, why would you insist on, like your Twitter is Father Matthew?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of, on the Twitter, a lot of your friends are Father Matthew.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting word you say. Why do you insist on? And I'd push back and say it's not insisting. Introducing yourself as something and calling yourself something isn't insisting.
Yeah.
It's saying, I'm in no different way than I might be Mr. Matthew or Mrs. Matthew or Ms. Whatever that. Whatever, it's just, you're not insisting on being called that. You're saying, well, I'm Father Matthew. That's who I am. That's who God has shaped me to be.
Well, I in a sense, I like using reverend because it, probably in the same as Father, actually. Maybe I'm answering my own question because I use reverend not because I like using, I am a reverend, but because it has the potential to start conversation.
But see, I can't stand reverend.
Why?
I can't stand reverend as a title, although, of course, I use it where it makes sense to use it, generally on grant applications. But no, I don't like reverend because that says, that's, for me, that has huge connotations. Reverend Matthew. Reverend.
Oh, well, yeah.
Am I reverend?
I'm not reverend.
I mean, is that, and actually, I think that's got way more
and yet,
ego in it.
That's where we,
Father.
on the evangelicals, will use reverend. That's how I wouldn't use Father, but a lot will use reverend. Yeah. And I use reverend in the sense like all my posts will come. If I'm buying shopping and I look down the list and they, by God, some companies still have it on their reverend, I will use it because the post person... Is that on the sexuality?
It's always other, because then you can select what you want.
But yeah, because the post person can see there's a reverend. Mine is for that kind of evangelism, that they would go to my house and they would see that there's a reverend. That's something different.
But see, now I think that talks more to your job than your orders.
Yes.
And see, for the Anglo-Catholic spectrum, we are far more about the orders than we are about the jobs.
Yeah.
And I wonder, and correct me, I wonder if the evangelical end of the spectrum actually don't care about jobs or orders. They just, in its purest form, just care about communicating God. And so if they were to go onto an estate, you would go in jeans and jumper in an attempt to be, which is it's that gospel image of being the good shepherd, of standing in the middle of your flock until you are accepted by that flock and they trust you so you can walk over the hill and take them to food and water. I think it's a stunningly good gospel example of how Christ's ministry should and can play out in the real world.
Yeah.
But it really works that way because we're not sheep. We're human beings that are this mixture of cultural influences. And so I'd rather go onto an estate wearing my cassock. In fact, I wouldn't even put priests on. If we're talking about estate ministry, I wouldn't have pioneer priests. I'd buy a house and ask 5 nuns to move in. And you watch the evangelism of put a religious community in the middle of that estate, not priests.
But this is
that's a whole separate
No, but this is where we, I when I went to see you in your last place, which is where I grew up in Hereford, you walking down the street in your cassock and seeing the people look at you and the impact was amazing and a real challenge to me. But on the other hand, I can also think of my brother's stag do, where I sat in a pub with 20 guys, the only 2 people heckling me were my brothers, and gave my testimony because there was an acceptance. Okay, fine, it's a stag do. I'm not going to go with my collar on a stag do. But it could have been, I still would have had that opportunity had it been something else. And I do that. Actually, what we need to do is learn off each other and cut through that.
Absolutely.
And go, right, what is the best on this estate, actually?
Yeah.
And is it both?
It's both and. Nearly always. I think every Twitter storm that happens between people involved in the church in one way or another, the response is nearly always both and.
Yeah.
It's nearly always both and. And so it's not to say the Anglo-Catholics have got it absolutely right, because you talk about Hereford, actually, yes, the experience I had in Hereford of wearing my cassock with the homeless community, with vulnerable people, with non-church people, was stratospheric. I mean, it was stunning, the interactions I had about God. But with church people in Hereford, it went down like a sack of spuds.
The day that I was there with the Plymouth Brethren.
Yeah, the Plymouth Brethren.
They loved that.
Brilliant. They did, though. We had genuinely good conversations. But it was the church people who had the problem with my cassock. It wasn't the people outside the church. Now, as a deacon, whose job it is to be outside the church, it was absolutely the right thing to do. It's both. So actually, the answer there was both and my failure in Hereford was not understanding that both and. And so, I made this call. I'm a deacon, and I'm going to go out and I'm going to wear my cassock, and I'm going to interact with vulnerable, with homeless people, and it worked. And it was brilliant to then maintain that as a whole, unbreakable, solid thing when it clearly wasn't working in one of the churches, and it was clearly actually causing issues. I should have been far more flexible in
and this is the thing, all things to all men. At what point, and this is, I think, the hardest thing to discern with titles of far gone now, with us, is actually at what point are you most effective as a priest? And that's really difficult because you still have that theology and that kind of calling and what you believe is right, but actually at certain times you need to be all things to all men at that point. And it might be going, well, I've got to get my cassock off, I've got to get my collar off, I've just got to be there because actually I'm going to be more effective. And sometimes we get in the way because it might be easy I'm not sure, is it easy for you to dress up like this and go out and evangelize, or is it easy for me to put on the cassock and walk down the street?
It depends. I remember there was a story, and a particularly spiky Catholic, because there are spiky Catholics, believe it or not. There are Anglo-Catholics who are pretty spiky, and Evangelicals who are spiky as well. And this is right, and this is absolutely right. But it was telling me in horror about his Evangelical friend in chapter. And his Evangelical friend in chapter never, ever, ever wore a collar. Ever. And then one day at chapter turned up in a collar. And she said to him, why are you wearing... Oh, I'm going to the council. We're applying for a grant to do up the playground. And he said, so I want to make a good impression with the grant committee. And so my friend said, so if you think that's important enough to wear a collar, why don't you wear a collar when you're in church? And actually, and that's it's quite a spiky comment. And I was there going, yeah, why isn't he wearing it all the time? But actually, what that priest was doing was recognizing that what he needed to do, the tool that he needed to deploy in that moment with the council, was for the council to see that his faith and where he was part of the community. So he deployed the tool. And I think that's that evangelical thinking of how we deploy tools to help people come to know Jesus better is a very, very healthy way of thinking about it. It's something that my end of the church needs to learn more. Well,
but it is a uniform at the end of the day. 200 years ago, we didn't have collars, as we know now. 100 and some odd years ago, Victorian times, and the Oxford movement brought a lot back. It is, in a sense, a uniform that people recognise. When I set up a family service at a small church in a village near us, and I spoke to two families there, and I said to them, thinking, I'll go like this, maybe with my collar on, my jeans, make it all cool. What do you want me to wear? And they said, we want you to wear your cassock. And I was like, wow. And then I went to the service with the kids.
Do you own a cassock?
Yeah, I do.
You do own a cassock. I have to share the story of how we first met.
Yeah, let me finish this. I went to the church, and we started doing the service, and we kept going up for months, and then it clicked with those kids who were young. If they saw a policeman, they see a policeman. They know the policeman from the uniform. They saw a firefighter or whatever it is. And they saw the uniform. And actually, in that, and having conversations with you and serving in an Anglo-Catholic church while I was at college, there's an importance about taking away from the person. And that's one thing that the uniform, as it were, or our robes do. It can take away, and that's why it makes you so approachable. And yet I make an individual statement about who I am in my clothes, because you can see the brand of my shoes, you can see my jeans. And so I can portray something to people which is not there quite comfortable, but a cassock and all those things will, if we both wore our cassocks now, apart from your 39 buttons on the front, and there's other things. Once you get into it, though, if we can get a bit, if we wore the same cassock, we are the same. It takes away from, and we're both.
So that's the point. Yeah. That's what it's meant to be. And our end of the church takes it too far, and your end of the church doesn't take it far enough. But there's pride is at the heart of both of those problems.
Yes.
So my end of the church, there's this pride about beautiful vestments, and that is wonderful because beauty in worship is really, really important. But when it becomes about you, you're losing the point of why you're robing, why you're wearing what you're wearing. But the same is true of the evangelical end, because the day we first met was in the vestry of St. Mary's in Princess Risborough, and I was there on, I think it was Long Summer Place, not sure. I was there on placement. And I'd been, and it was linked to my sending church, so I knew the church well, and we were getting ready for I think it was the 8 a.m, and you were the new assistant curate, so you'd just come out of college.
Good evangelical?
Good evangelical. And you arrived, and David, Father David...
He used to be many years ago before he became an evangelical.
He still is. So Father David sent you to the vestry and said, go put on a surplice. And you ran into the vestry and you looked at the cupboard and went, which one's a surplice?
Because I thought it was like some extra surplus requirements type thing.
Yeah. And I still don't know whether or not you were being genuine about not knowing what a surplus was, or if you were making a statement about, I don't know what these things are because they're not important. But I didn't care because actually it was really funny. And we both completely, we gelled over that and spent the rest of the summer together taking the mickey out of one another for the various ends of our churchmanship. But united in the fact that what we were doing together was taking God out into the world, was taking... sorry, that's not right. We weren't taking God out into the world. God was already there. We were showing people where God was.
And actually, and that's the funny thing, and this is where we strike up this huge friendship and appreciation for each other, is, I think, people seeing us together, me rocking up as a new curate, always jeans, hair and all that, and you, on placement, but still potentially very much Father Matthew, seeing these two worlds, for them, collide, which shouldn't, because obviously evangelicals and Anglican Catholics hate each other, and getting around and taking the mickey actually was really powerful.
But I'm increasingly finding this within the Church of England. I don't know if you were finding it, but it's not really a spectrum. It's more like a horseshoe. And you've got the Anglo-Catholics at one end of the horseshoe, and you've got the evangelicals. And we are a lot nearer to one another, because the Anglo-Catholics at the Anglo-Catholic end of the spectrum, the evangelicals at the evangelical end of the spectrum, we all care about making Jesus present in people's lives. And it unites us. And increasingly, we understand that that's what we care about. And so actually we can work together to do that. And it doesn't matter if it's being gunged at a summer camp, as you and I were, or if it's visiting somebody with the Holy Sacrament after Mass.
Well, that's what I think is if this country went to pot and there was a war or something like that, we would forget our frilly bits which we have, and we would just be out there helping people and preaching the word, and just, everything that we would hold dear would just come to, people out there, and they are dying. They take the analogy that there's not a war that is like that.
Yeah, I think this is a dangerous line of conversation given where we are politically in the country at the moment.
With Brexit. But out there, just doing what God's called us to do. And I think that's where we find you have, I've always joked that you have a few more frilly bits, but then quite literally you do.
And they're very nice frilly bits.
But ultimately, what I have seen is we both hold the gospel as centre and sacred. And if we had to get rid of the churches and everything else, we might be looking different, but we would be out there doing that. What we don't do, forgetting all our titles, because this is what we started as, is do that.
We don't do it enough.
Well,
we do it nowhere near enough.
Across the...
I would love to see the spikier end of the Evangelical Church and the spikier end of the Anglo-Catholic Church working together more, being out there, doing missions together, being out in communities together, doing that work together, and rather than sitting there criticising one another or arguing with one another, we'll just leave that to the middle bit of the church that seems to be more concerned
with other issues.
I don't want to, and I'm not going to have a go at any bit of the church.
Yeah.
If you are there to make
not
Christ,
this one.
if you are there to make Jesus Christ present and real in people's lives, then my gosh, I will stand behind you, cheering you, whatever you call yourself, whatever your title is, whatever you're ordained. If that's what you're there to do, I will be behind you, cheering you all the way. And I wish that more of us could get to the point where we could do that. And that's been a huge learning for me over the last 18 months, and it's certainly not where I was when we met. But a big part of it is spending time with you. You know, evangelicals, I've discovered, are human too.
And we have a sense of humour. It is, because I'm at 4 churches now, and where I even wear a stole from the start of the service.
I used to refuse to wear a stole for your ordination. You did. You wore a preacher's scarf. Yeah.
And I wore a preacher's scarf here, but I did ask for permission.
You did, yeah. That was very kind of you, but I still got a photograph of you with a thurible, so it's fine.
Thurible is where they put loads of smoke and
holy smoke,
stand next to you and try to...
So listen, we started this conversation talking about job titles, and we've ended up having a much broader conversation, but priests, deacons, bishops, orders, vicars, rectors, padres, chaplains, on and on and on, confusing
pastor.
Job title, pastor.
If this is being watched in the States, which it will, a lot of those titles that you just said are just, because they virtually just have pastors and ministers.
But I bet every single person watching this,
church.
I bet every single person watching this will know what a priest is.
Yes. But if you say priest, the important thing, well, the telling thing, if I say priest now, what pops into your head?
Put it in the comment section.
Yes. Oh, that was so good. I didn't have to do that part. What do you call us?
What helps for you? What language is useful for you?
I thought that what do you call us? I just saw lots
don't
of rude
words. Please. That was.
And what do you call your vicar? Or is it important what you call them? Do you think that actually we shouldn't be called vicars if we're not vicars, or we should be called priest, or we should be called father, or we should be called other things? Put it in the comments below and start the conversation, because that's actually huge for people. Because we're talking as priests, but people out there going, you know what, just vicar.
Yeah.
You're vicar. I don't care what else you are. That's what I know you are. Or pastor in the States. Also, if you like these conversations, because I think we should do this lots more. This is fun. This is impromptu, by the way.
This is fun. Let's do this more.
Put in the comments below. Subscribe to the channel, because a lot of great content is coming out. We will get onto more nitty-gritty stuff. Even the stuff that you...
And it won't be internal church stuff. Let's...
Oh, external.
Let's
world stuff. Stuff outside those doors.
Absolutely.
We're in Matthew's church, by the way. We need to go around churches and speak about churches as well. That would be really interesting.
All right.
So we will see you.
Let's wrap it. That's my boss.
And his boss is there.
Who's my training incumbent? There's another word. Training incumbent. He really dislikes it when I call him my boss. He really doesn't like it. So I'm going to get told off now. I think we should wrap up.
Okay. So subscribe to the channel. Give this video a like so more people see it. And we will see you soon. Bye.